Welcome again to another edition of Drummer Nation, the show for and about drummers, where we talk all things drum and drumming with some of the best in the world, and today is no exception. As always, let's start by introducing my partner in crime and co-host and fabulous drummer in his own right, Adam Nussbaum. How are you today, Adam? There's the
If
Nussbaum
I
salute.
knew how, if I knew how, I would be a genius, but I'm glad to be here.
And we're all glad you're here too. Now, the special guest today, as promised, is a legend, I would say, Denny Seiwell. And here he is. Thank you, Danny, for being here. I've never met you before, and it's my honor, sir.
Hello, and thank you very much for the nice intro and nice to be good to
You're
see you.
welcome. I have your book here. I was going to hold it up.
Hold that for you.
There you go. He's got a brand new book out, and we can see it there. That's much better. The best and worst of times, and I want to mention the quality of the book before we even get started. I know Rob Wallace. I know Ed Bergamini, your editor. Rob's the publisher, and Robin Flans is a friend of the show and a mentor of mine to some extent, and also a pioneer in what you want to call drum media or something. So you've got a great team there. And the book is done on heavy gloss paper with color pictures, and it feels good in hand, and it's just a nice product. Yeah, look at that. So
Yeah, I
before we
like
even
this.
start to talk about what's in it, let's just give props to the people who helped you make it because it's fantastically put together. Fantastically is a word? I guess it is now.
Yeah, why not?
So I knew about your work with Wings, of course, and we're going to cover that, obviously. But I didn't realize that you had you came up as a jazz player with true jazz creds. I mean, your first gig in New York was with Zoot Sims Alcone.
Right.
That's jazz, man.
What
That's
year
the
was that, Denny?
pardon.
What year was that?
68, 67 or 68. I think I started. It was late 67. Dave Frischberg. You remember Dave Frischberg? He said,
Sure.
"Go
Yeah.
down to Half Note. Tell Zoot Sims that I sent you down." I was living in the Poconos. We were both working in the Poconos. And Dave said, "Go down. Mousy Alexander's leaving to go on a tour, and they're going to need a drummer at the half note." He said, "Go down and tell Zoot I told you to come down and sit in with him." I said, "Hey, man, Dave Fishberg sent me down to say hello and maybe sit in with you." And Zoot said, "What do you play?" I said, I'm a drummer." He says, "I hate drummers." Hello. I got the gig that night, and I've had that for a couple of years, and it was wonderful.
Hudson and Spring.
That's right.
And did that open
Oh,
some doors for you in New York as a jazz player, I presume?
it did because all of the cats used to come down Sunday nights, to just see who was the new kid in town playing with Alan Zoot and the boys down at the Half Note. Because we played with Anita O'Day and Bill Berry and Brew Moore, and it was everybody that came through. We had like a house section with Ross Tompkins, Russell George, Victor Gaskin. There was Sproles. There was a bunch of different bass players, and also a few piano players. Frischberg was one of them, and me. I just became the house drummer, and it was awesome.
And how old were you at the time?
Oh, that was he 25.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the new
27.
hotshot in New York City, 25 years old, breaking into the jazz scene, and started
Yeah,
working with a lot of people all over the place, I presume.
yeah,
Well, I read the
yeah.
book. I'm not presuming.
All you need, all you needed was talent.
Yeah, isn't that something? Imagine that. Some of the
And the
stuff I hear.
ability the
Go ahead.
ability to help everyone else sound good.
There you go. Well, that's
Hmm.
talent.
Bingo.
That's the best talent. Now, how did that start parlaying into studio work? Because you became a very active session player.
Well, let me tell you a quick story. Russ Savakis. I don't know if you knew him, Adam. Russ was a contractor. He was a bass player, and he came and he sat in one night up at. He filled in one night up at Mount Airy up at the show band because one of the bass player was sick or something. So Russ lived in the Poconos, so he came up and he took the bass chair that night. We had I don't know 7-piece band. It might have even been a weekend where there was an 18-piece band, but we had good acts come through and good. It was a good band. And Russ said to me, he said, "Man, you really play well enough that I could get you started in the studio. You should think about coming into New York." And I went, "Yeah, okay, I'll think about it." He'd help me get started. And so he invited me down to, this is great actually. He invited me down to a session to see how it went, you know. And I went into A&R 48th Street, the old one, over above Manny's Music, on the 48th Street one. And it was on the roof of this building, and it was a Burt Bacharach session with Dionne Warwick and about, I don't know, a small orchestra, 30, 40 pieces, something like that. Gary Chester was playing drums. And they were doing that song, "Do You Know the Way to San Jose?" And I sat right next to Russ with the string bass in between the bass and the drums. So I kept an eye on Gary. And Gary was playing stick and a brush. Dum, dum, dum. It was so quiet, so intense. I couldn't believe it. He played just mastered the time. There was no click tracks or any of that stuff. And the string section being right next to you had to be quiet. And I said, "Oh, I can do that." And that gave me a first look at what the New York session world was really about, you know. And I couldn't wait to get my foot in the door.
Well, what you're talking about describes reading. You must have been a good reader to start with.
Oh yeah. Well, you work with a singer, dance team, and a comedian 6 nights a week. You learn to read real fast.
Talk
I
about that
was
experience.
I was a good reader, though. I mean, my dad was a drummer, and he played with Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey back in the day before they became famous. They were from the next town over, Lansford, Pennsylvania. But I studied. I read through all the drum books by the time I was 13. I'd seen everything that was in print and gone through them with my main teacher was in the boys' band. His name was Professor Charles Frohneiser, and he took me through everything that he could take me through. He wasn't a drummer himself, but then I started studying out with local drummers that were teaching as well, and so I was kind of well versed. And by the time I got out of high school, it was time to go into the service. I was about to draft me, and I got into the Navy School of Music, which gave me a little more training, and that was really wonderful. I was there for maybe a year and a half between the two times that I was at the Navy School in Washington D.C. And so I was quite the reader. And throughout my Navy career, I got to play with the West Side Story with a symphony orchestra. It was Kenosha, Wisconsin, I think they called the base and asked if anybody could play the sit down drums to West Side Story, and I was recommended, and I did things like that. But I was really quite a well versed reader, and that Poconos gig, believe it or not, though, those dance teams. I mean, you talk about music. I mean, and there's a lot of times we didn't have a rehearsal. We had what they call a talk through, and you would sit backstage with the whole band, and the act would say, "And now we go from here to here. Let her be. We do this. It goes from a cha cha, it goes to a merengue, and then there's some cuts here and there. And then I throw her girl. Yeah, well, you're just talking through this thing. Anyway, quick story. Dave Frischberg, maniac. This guy he had a sense of humor like far deeper than Adams, I think.
Well, let me
But
jump in here because Frischberg was known as for to be very comic. He had a tune, My Attorney
yeah,
Bernie, and all kinds of comedic
yeah,
tunes, and
yeah.
a quirky writer, but very interesting, good stuff. But anyway, go
And a
on.
fine pianist.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, we call him the Phantom. Not no, the Phantom was Ross Tompkins. The Snake, the Cobra, the Cobra. That's what we call him because he always weaved while he was
Right, right.
playing,
And Ross
and
was the
he's
piano player on the Tonight Show for many years.
yeah, 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 yeah. But Dave used to have he used to have this little recorder, and he'd record the talk throughs, and sometimes those talk throughs were funnier than the shows or the comedians. especially there was this one guy, Norm. I think his name was Norm Goldner. He had a tuxedo and wore a gold lame left arm, and he would play the trumpet, and he would impersonate Judy Garland and voices, famous voices, through the trumpet. And so
Oh,
as he's doing his talk through, Dave is recording it. We're all in stitches laughing, and this guy is serious. But Dave did things like that that were just wonderful.
well, that ability to read. I mean, it's big band oriented, right? You come up
Yeah,
reading that way, and that holds you in good stead in the studios for everything you're going
yeah,
to look at, right? I mean, West Side Story is not an easy book.
right.
To sight read that is pretty hard to do.
I
Yeah,
think, you were very fortunate to be at a time when there was work on a
yeah.
nightly basis.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you can't practice experience.
True. Very
That's an unfortunate thing now that these situations aren't present for the new generation that's coming along. I don't know what it's going to be for them, but you
yeah.
know, we're the digital immigrants. They're the digital natives.
True. Very true.
So will
Yeah,
you
and
soon?
you could do 3 to 5 sessions in a day, and that was kind of normal.
That's what I
You
was
would do,
just going to ask. You do like the 10, 2, and 6 thing, right?
yeah,
And get up the next day and do it again and again and again and again, all over the city and kids here and
yeah.
there, and never stopped. How long did that
Yeah.
go on?
That was the first couple of years I was in town. I mean, uh, you do a 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and a noon jingle or something like that. And
Hmm.
they were all very close in a few blocks. You could walk between studios, and we had a guy that used to deliver a trap case. They had house drums, but usually most of the studios. But they had we had a guy named Doopy that used to deliver your trap case for $5, and I'd have like 3 or 4 trap cases around town, and he would just take it from to wherever I was going to be at such and such a time, and it really made it a lot easier than dragging it through the ice and the snow and the slush and all that stuff. So,
Oh,
and when as time passed and I started doing a lot more record dates, I started to talk the engineers into going from the dead body sound of hitting a piece of meat to a doom, an actual tone out of the drums. And I started bringing my old Gretsch tom toms. In fact, I remember calling Frank Ippolito at Pro Drum, called Remo up, and he said, "I got a guy here. He's kind of a hot new guy in the studios, but he wants some heads without the coating on it. Can you do that for him?" And apparently they weren't making them. Even the bottom heads of tom toms were coated in those days. But so I don't know if I think I remember seeing Jim Gordon on the Andy Williams show that he had clear heads on his tom toms, and I said, "What is that? That would be great." And so anyway, I had them made up for. So I was the first guy in New York, and the engineers hated
wow.
me.
Well, let me
Yeah,
ask you why you wanted a clear head. What were you looking for?
tone. When you have acoustical chamber, the top and bottom heads, you have a tone, boom, and it's
Hmm.
easier to tune rather than blah 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 blah.
Well, I meant
You
clear
know,
versus coated.
yeah.
Why did you want
Well,
it clear? More tone?
the truer tone. They had a
Hmm.
nice tone where you could hear a lot more stick attack. But rock and roll, that was wonderful. And some of the early rock dates, I mean, I did dates like John Denver was one of my first albums, Milt Oak, and I think I used that sound on that album. It was the engineers loved it. They at first they said, "No, you're going to have to tape that shit up, man."
Who are some of your other who are some of the other guys that were doing the stuff that you were doing at that time?
Oh,
As far as drummers
Ronnie,
on the scene.
Ronnie Zito, Herb Lavelle, um, geez, Bill Livornia, Saul Goodman, Mel Lewis. Mel was doing
In
a
New
lot of the
York City. Yeah.
yeah, and Grady Tate and Jesus, all of those guys, and I was. It's funny though. One day, Mike Maneri, of
Of
course.
course.
Yeah, you must. Anyway, Mike called me. He had a jingle company, and he called me for a jingle up at A&M. And I go up to A&M, the big room, and there's a podium with a set of drums in the middle of it. And there's in front of the window to the control room, there's six music stands. There's a conga player, and they're all hand percussionists, and one set of drums. And I walk into the room and I said, Mike, yo, what am I playing? And Mike says, you're playing drums. And I looked over, and this section was Phil Krause, Montego Joe, Mel Lewis, Grady Tate, and a few other of my heroes, of my idols, you know. And I said, I can't play drums in front of these guys. He said, it's kind of a pop thing, you know? And you got the shit. They don't play it as well as you do. I just need you to play this. And I said, well, when I get done crapping in my pants, I'll see what I can come up with. But it was yeah, it was an interesting time because it was that changeover from pop music was going from swing to eighth note music. And you know, I always maintain that fact that when I was in the Navy and I went to South America and I heard the bossa nova for the first time, the straight eight thing is I fell in love with it, and that gave me a leg up on doing the rock stuff. I wasn't a rock drummer. Well, my first rock gig was with Paul McCartney, for Christ's sake.
Well, that brings us to that because the quote on the back of your book from Paul, which I had in my hand a minute ago, was that you could play anything he asked you to play,
Yeah,
and that certainly came from your background as a jazz and studio player, right?
absolutely.
And Paul was not used to. I mean, Ringo's a great drummer, but he doesn't do that, right? He's not a swing guy, though he swings.
I bet if he had to, he could. He might not be as apt as capable at reading music, but he's a lot more talented than everybody gave him credit for.
You know, I think he's great. Well, it wasn't a dig on Ringo, one of the best
Yeah,
drummers in the world. Yeah.
We love him. Come on. Gave
yeah.
that band the vibe, you know?
What's yeah, his parts. I mean, he changed drumming.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah,
I just meant I don't think he was as versatile as maybe what you brought to Paul's band. Maybe not.
yeah.
It's just opinion.
Well,
So you
uh,
got the gig with Paul. There's a great story of you. You want to tell a brief version of that audition, or it's out
oh,
there
sure.
already? I know, but I have you here. I'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah. Well, Adam probably remembers the old Jim and Andy's, uh, the bar where everybody hung out in between dates and stuff. And
That was
anyway,
where, yeah.
That's
they
where
had a
Jay
phone
Canna glued some like a quarter to the floor, right?
part. Yes, that's true. That's true.
And they watch
If I
everybody try to pick it up.
try to pick it up, we say, oh, okay, that guy, he ain't got a chance. But we had a phone in the back of the bar. It was a direct line to Judson 2 8800 radio registry. And
That's
that
right.
was where all the studio cats would just apply to this service, and they'd keep track of your book. They knew what studio you were in those days, and if somebody was looking for you, they knew how to find you. Well, Barry Kornfeld had called and asked me if I would do a demo for him at some studio, and I just had a session cancel. So I said, "Yeah, okay, I don't do demos much anymore, but I haven't seen Barry in a long time, so I'll do this." So I went down to it was 43rd Street, I believe, between 8th and Ninth, and it was kind of a funky neighborhood, just full of brownstones, and it looked like they were going to be torn down or renovated or something. And I walked up to the address, and I said, there was a guy sitting in the lobby at a desk, and I said, "Is there a studio here?" And he pointed to the basement. I'm going to get mugged. So I went down into the basement. It's a dirt floor basement. There's nothing in it except a set of SIO drums, rented drums, and a folding chair in the corner. And Paul and Linda are both sitting on that folding chair together. And he's sitting in his lap, and hey, you're Paul McCartney. And she said, yeah, I know. I said, what's up? And he said, well, I'm in town. I'm going to make a record, and I'm going to look at some drummers. Would you mind? You want to play for me? And I said, I'd love to. I said, you got a bass or a guitar so we can just, play it together? And he said, no, just you, just you playing the drums. And then I said something. I think the next line that I said kind of got me the job. Because I said, well, I get it. I mean, if you can't get it on by yourself, how are you going to get it on with anybody else? And we laughed. He laughed. It broke the ice. And then I went into some grooves. And, when I had those tom toms with me too. I said, hey, do you mind if I just throw my toms up? Because this rented kit is horrible. So I said, go ahead. So I threw up the 14. These guys right here, they're right behind me. That's it, 1964 Gretches. And I threw up those two tom toms with that new heads on and stuff. Uh, I said, okay, what do you want to hear? He said, just give me some rock and roll time. So I played like Paul McCartney played the drums or like Ringo played the drums. And I just channeled them. Bam, boom, boom. I just went right into it. And he loved it. And then he said, how about this or that? He asked me to couple different grooves, some Latin stuff and whatever. Anyway, I just did it all for him, and we had a good time, and we laughed. I was comfortable. It didn't freak me out that I was doing this for a Beatle or Paul McCartney. He was just another guy looking for a drummer, and I'd never,
People are people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'd never auditioned for anything ever before that. Well, no, I should. For the Navy School of Music, I had to do an audition to get in there, but it was great. And so anyway, I leave the studio or the basement, and I say, "Geez, I'll never get this gig. There's so many great drummers in this town. I'll go home with a story. I just met a Beatle, and that'll be my story." So I went up to Jim's that day, and I told him what happened, and the word had been getting out. I was the first guy that got auditioned, but the word was out that he was in town looking from some players. So I said, well, I'll just forget about this. And I'll be damned. 3 or 4 days after that audition, I get a call from Paul, and he calls me up on my home phone. This is way before cell phones. Calls me on my home phone, and he goes, "Hello, this is Paul." I said, "Paul who?" He said, "The guy you played for the other day." "Oh, that
Oh,
Paul.
that Paul.
Yeah, how you doing?" And I want on this album, and I'd like for you to be the drummer. Are you available? And I said, geez, I don't know. Let me look at my book. Good thing he couldn't see me. I cracked open the book. I threw it up in the air. I leapt for joy. I said, oh no, am I getting this call? Is this for real? And he said, yeah, I'd like to book you for. Well, at the time, he was going to try 3 drummers. He was going to start with me, and then he was going to go with one of my favorite drummers of all times. It was a guy by the name of Donald McDonald. You must have known Donald, Adam.
I
Donald was
didn't
great.
know him, but I
Uh,
know he was a great
oh,
drummer. He played with White Elephant. He played with a
yeah,
lot of different groups, and
yeah.
yeah, he was a contender for sure.
Oh man, he was the second one, and then Herb Lavelle was going to take the last week of that recording. And after the first week, Paul and I just hit it off so well doing the Ram album that he let the other 2 guys go, and he asked me if I could make myself available for 6 weeks, Monday through Friday, banker's hours 9 to 6. Of course, he didn't show up at 9 ever, but I was there, and Spinoza and McCracken were the guitar players. Spinoza did a short stint, and then he I don't know he did something wrong, but Paul asked me if I knew another guy that I worked with that would be good for this project, and I said, well, Hugh McCracken would be great for it. And so Huey came in and finished the album. But Spinoza started out. He did all the early. The first track was a track by the name of "Another Day." It was a single from the album. It was released before the album, and he was really great on that. He did a few of the tracks, and then he got busy, and he asked Paul if he could leave early one day. He
Oops.
had something to go to, and Paul didn't like that. So anyway, that's the story on how Huey was brought in.
And
And
this didn't have much to do with the music. It just had to do with the personal vibe, I guess.
exactly. I still, to this day, I call Spinoza whenever I see him. When I get the pleasure of bumping into him, I call him McCartney's half guitar player.
That's hilarious. So now you're
Wow.
in a situation where, I mean, Ringo
What
was.
year? What
Go
year is
ahead.
this? Just to for the time.
70, it's either the end of 70 or the beginning of 71.
Okay.
So now
Yeah,
you're the drummer that was chosen. The only guy I knew he had worked with extensively was Ringo, and you're following Ringo. And Paul, you mentioned in the book, was a band guy. He wasn't Paul McCartney and the Beatles. It was the Beatles, and he wanted to
yeah,
set that up again with the new band. And they finally came upon the word Wings. You mentioned you go through that story, but he was a guy who couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed. And he decides to put this little tour together to play, just show up at colleges and
yeah.
and see where they can set up and play.
Well, what's interesting about that is Adam really will understand this because as a session guy, that's one way of thinking about the music. You go in there and you say, okay, they got this song. Sometimes it's not a very interesting song. We call them polishing a turd, but as a session guy, you're going to go in and make their music sound good and make it quick too. So there's a different head that you have than when you're in a band and a band that where the leader stems from the Beatles. I mean, they had a different way of thinking about making music and the art form. And so with Wings, when it came along, there was Paul and me. His wife Linda had no idea what end was up. She was new at the piano, and Henry and Denny Lane were definitely band players. They didn't have any of the session experience. How we can, some of the stuff that Paul and I had. When Paul was in the studio with the Beatles, it was full on session guy without even knowing it. But so I'm in a strange situation where three of the five members. Uh, are on a different level than I am. So I had to kind of find a space where I could understand where they were coming from and how I could complement everything in what I did as a drummer. There was no time for, fancy fills and all of that stuff. It was really play the music, play the song, and bring the most out of the song. Different concept, which really made it very enticing. I used to think about I really spent a lot of time thinking about the music before I approached it.
And they were hard songs. We were not talking about a shuffle for "Can't Buy Me Love," though that was great. They were hard
Yeah,
songs with lots of A theme, B theme, different sections, different tempos, all kinds of
sure.
changes like that.
Yeah,
Did he? And he gave you a lot of freedom, didn't he?
total freedom. The only time he ever asked me to do anything other than what I came up with the first time was Uncle Al, the Ram album. That I would like you to come up with a different. I was just, I was playing the Gary Chester beat, and he said, "Can you find something that leaves some space for the vocal in there?" And I went, that's weird. Let me see what I can come up with. So I went, boom, chick, boom, and it was he loved it. He just thought that was sliced bread. He thought that was cool to come up with a unique part like that. And actually, it made the song so much more interesting. And so that was the only time he ever asked me to do something other than the part that I'd come up with. And I'm glad he did. And Wings was wide open. I mean, we were just looking for ways to make the song happen. And he was still writing gorgeous songs.
I got a question for you. Was there any paper involved? Or he would
Never.
just play
Oh,
something and that was it? And he trusted your abilities.
yeah,
There we
That's
yeah.
great.
go.
That's
He
great.
would,
Trust.
a typical,
It's a big deal here.
Hire great people and let them do what they do.
he
Yeah.
would come, he would play the song for us. And there's a booklet that came along with the Ram album and some of the box sets, and it shows Huey and me and Paul just hanging out in the studio, and he would play the song for us on the piano or the guitar, and he'd sing the song, and then we'd start. He'd get on the instrument we were going to use for the track. And by the way, I was using the Beatle drum set. I got it from Frank Ippolito, who bought it from the Museum of Famous People when they went out of business in New York. And it's supposedly the set that Ringo used at the Shea Stadium concert. So
Oh
that
my
was a
goodness.
all stuff. It's in the book. But
Yeah.
anyways, we'd start working on the track, and as soon as Paul felt that we had it going on, it hit the record. We'd do a couple of takes, and that was usually it. We'd do a track a day, and he'd come in at 10:30, and but maybe by noon we were recording, and by 1 o'clock we were done. We'd break for lunch. Sometimes we'd come back and work some more. Sometimes we wouldn't. It was a real easy gig, but it was just so rewarding in so many ways.
That's just amazing. Now, when you're out
Wow.
on the road, eventually you take this band on the road, and he's got a big funky bus, and everybody's hanging out. You're staying in cheap places, and
Album, the second tour, that was the I'm sorry, the European tour, but
right.
the university tour was a 12-passenger transit van and a box truck for the gear. The Paul drove the 12-passenger transit van with the wives, the kids, the dogs, and yeah, it was really wild. We just set out without a gig, without a hotel, with nothing. We just said, well, let's look. They'd open up the map, and say, Nottingham. There must be a nice place up there, like university we can play. Let's go to Nottingham today. So we'd go up to Nottingham and we'd pull in, and the roadies would go into the student union and they say, hey, is there a place to put on a concert today or tonight? And well, the kids are having finals right now. It's really a bad time. So we got Paul McCartney and his band out here in the van, and the guy'd come out and Paul would wave to him, and
That's
he'd say,
amazing.
"Yeah, yeah, yeah." You put it. So that's how it started, and I think we did 11 shows. Um,
I
you know,
love this. That's
Isn't that
fantastic.
great? It's like the antithesis
I
of what he
can't
was
believe
dealing with the
we
Beatles.
have enough material to do a complete. We had to repeat, give Ireland back to the Irish twice, and yeah, it was pretty wild, and no equipment. I mean, we had there was a there was a mic, an overhead mic, and a kick drum mic on the drums, and that was all. We played in lunchrooms for Christ's sake. We didn't play in the grand auditorium. So
I
it
love
was pretty wild. I'll never forget the first show we did. Linda starts off the song, doom, doo, 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 doom, doo. That's Wildlife. Anyway, she forgot the part. So he kicks off the song and forgets it. He walks over to her and said, no, Lynn, it goes like this. And he shows her, and then we started it again. And just, that was, that's the way it was.
It's real.
And we were bringing in a new band. And while we were, we'd go and look for a hotel while they were setting up the limited gear that we had. And we'd come back and they'd hang flyers around the campus. Kids would know about it. And we came back, the place was packed. And we just play a set of music and go back to the room and listen to the set off the board, and do a few things, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Now the book has the word in it, the worst of times too, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, how did that slide start to happen?
Well, to encapsulate it, I mean, I was there at the best of times and the worst of times as well. But the best of times was just all of that freedom that we had, breaking in a new band, knowing that everything you do is going to be related to the last time that the Beatles were seen, you know. So there's not a chance in hell that we can do anything right. And we did a lot of right things. It was really becoming, Paul wanted us to be known as the Beatles were known. So, uh, it was really coming along fine. We were growing together as a band and everything's going. But the Beatle court receivership had a lot to do with the worst of times because when Paul had to sue the other three Beatles to keep them from signing with Alan Klein, who the judge saw was not doing them any good as an organization. The Beatles, Alan was not doing them any. He said, well, "This is screwed up. We're going to have to work this out." And so the money that the handshake agreement that we made when we started Wings was we were all going to be partners in this band. So I figured, you know, I'll make enough money to take care of the rest of my life just on this project. And then the Beatles court case came along, and all that went out the window, and no money could leave. Everything went into Apple, nothing came out. So we were working for 70 quid a week, which is about $175 American at the time. And I was making a couple grand a week in the studio in New York. So it was tough. I still don't know how we lived on that kind of a salary. And it was just the way it was. I mean, the Beatles had 50 quid a week or something like that when they were Beatles. But of course, they could call a company, buying a house, buying a Lamborghini, and the company would pay for it. I couldn't do that, but anyway, that was the worst part was the elephant in the room that we were still managing to make good music and go and on the run when I said to myself, I think I've had enough here. Unless we can get a contract or a letter of agreement or anything in place that guarantees that I'm going to get paid for my time, uh, this just isn't working out. And that was there were some problems as the band grew. So did the problem, and as the problem got bigger, and we were doing bigger scale, like we just did a 28 city tour of Europe, um, and there were like 20,000 seat sheds and what have you, and we lost money on the tour. I didn't make a dime on it, and
Well, let me
this,
ask you this: a devil's advocate. Paul
yeah,
could have paid the band, right?
that's what I thought. I mean, just the writers' royalties that it would have nothing to do with Apple. Uh, just Dick James royalties, Northern songs.
Mm.
Mechanic from his songwriting should have been enough to front that band, but he was saying that he was claiming a poorhouse.
That's how
And
Ellington kept the band on the road forever. He used his royalties.
pardon?
That's how
It's
Ellington kept the.
incredible.
That's how Ellington kept the band on the road so long. He used his royalties to support the band.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I know you
You
guys
know,
made up for all that, and everything's cool now with Paul and you.
yeah. Oh, yeah. We're great friends, I must say. But I went through a bad period when I left the band. I didn't want to go back to New York to the session world, and I always wanted to come out to L.A. and play with the studio orchestras that did the soundtracks or what have you. So I came out here and I figured that the door would be wide open for me to come into. And it,
That's a pretty narrow door there. Yeah,
huh?
that's a pretty narrow door there.
Yeah, yeah, it was. So I got out to L.A. and they said, "Who the hell are you and who sent for you?" They thought I was an English rock and roller.
Mm.
If it wasn't for guys like Chuck DeMonico, my best friend, the bass player, MVP in the studios and in the jazz world. Chuck told all the contractors and the people in LA that he said, "You need this guy on your list. He's an accomplished musician. He's not an English rock and roller. He can do anything that you need." And he told all of the film. And so I started catching on a little bit, but then the strikes came along and the drum machines and all of that stuff. So it was a tough time, and all the time lurking in the background was I just got screwed out of millions of dollars. Why is life so tough? And that's when I started drinking. Well, everybody did a little bit of drinking and drugging those days. It was part of our business, to be honest. But I was getting more into drinking just to drown some of the feelings I was having about that big loss in my life. And it wasn't. I finally had enough of it and decided that I couldn't live like this anymore, and decided to stop. And joined the recovery program, and I did what they asked me to do, and I tried to find a new way of living so that the resentments that I had didn't run my life. And yeah, so
Well,
and in doing so, I got a chance to make amends the way I left the band, not the way I wasn't paid, but I got a chance to say, I'm really sorry for the way I left the band, left you in the lurch. It was the night that we were leaving for Lagos, Nigeria to record Band on the Run. So he, thankfully, we rehearsed it up in Scotland, and Paul used all of my drum parts. He played them himself, which he did a great job. And I liked the way he took my drum parts and put his own little personal twist on it. Great
I,
drum. I love he sees the music of the drummer in his own music. It's wonderful. So anyway, where was I now? Yeah. So anyway,
well,
uh,
it's a fascinating story.
I started I started catching on out here in LA and doing a lot of sessions, records and stuff. And then I really James Newton Howard, a composer friend of mine, who I'd known from the rock days.
Film score
He's
guy, yeah.
out in the studios doing film scores, and he started. He said, "I know you can do it. You want to come in and so my first film with him was Waterworld, and it was every other measure was odd. 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 with movable click and all of this. So I went, oh my God! I went to Joe Picaro. I said, Joe, I got this session in 2 weeks with you guys. I just wanted to see. Joe knew me as a player, and he loved me as a player, a jazz guy. But he didn't know what my reading capability, and this was going to require some serious reading. So Joe put me through the ringers. He gave me one of his notebooks, that school of music they had going here in LA, and it was really difficult. And I stumbled, I stepped on my dick a few times. And Joe said, "You'll never see anything that hard. Just don't. You'll handle this."
Joe
So he was,
Picaro, by the way, Jeff Picaro's dad, studio
yes,
legend, and
yeah,
Jeff came up in that whole scene. And could those
and
guys can read fly shit, man? They read anything.
oh yeah, and the section was Joe Picaro, Emil Richards, uh, Larry Bunker, Bob Zamiti. Uh, who else was in the section? It'd be a 6 or 7 piece section,
They
and
couldn't
James.
get any good guys. Unbelievable.
That's right.
So I knew all of the guys, but when a non-classical player is thrown into that orchestral situation, it's a 110-piece symphony orchestra. You're truly under the microscope.
Yeah.
You make one mistake, okay. Make 2 mistakes, you make 3 mistakes, you're gone. Yeah. So anyway, Joe and I had this. There was a cue where there were 2 piccolo snare drums on either side of the stage, like 40, 50 feet apart, and it had to sound like one drum in stereo.
Hmm.
And I looked at the part, and it was all measured rolls, dots, and ties, and oh my God, I pissed my pants just looking at it. I said, Joe,
Go
he
play
said,
this.
don't worry, handle it. So we had a chance to shed it together. So we shed it in the back of the stage, and it was triple pianissimo too. So I said,
Of
oh my,
course. Of course.
dude. And we got through it. We did it in a couple of takes, and it was after that I was like, bring it on, I'm ready now. So it was that was my indoctrination into that world, and I just
Wow.
could not be more grateful.
Well, your story is fascinating. It's one of success and failure, of redemption, of personal character, of perseverance. Because the music industry, man, it's going to take you up and down, isn't it?
Yeah,
Now, how do you see? I was watching some videos of you playing, and it's very forceful and very powerful, but you're not killing yourself. You know what I mean? Don't you think there are guys today that just play too damn loud for that stuff?
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, way too loud. I mean, I'm going to break this There's a friend of mine, a new friend. His name is Jeremy Patrick Colson. He played with Steve Vai for many years. He's a
Okay.
wonderful drummer. Uh, he really is, but he's a basher, and he can play odd times. He plays all kind of grooves and stuff, but he only plays one way loud. And we started getting together over here, and I had these two little sets of drums, and we'd play together, and he'd just be amazed at how I could play intricate stuff at such a low level, yet it was still powerful, and so he's studying with me now, so I can bring him down a little bit, and he gets some dynamics into his style and his and what have you, and I just love that kind of a, no, I don't call him a student, just a friend. He saw that and he said, I don't have this in my playing capabilities, and I need. I think Denny's the guy to go to. So I'm really happy that he came to me. And there's been guys over the years that came to me and said, "Hey, can you teach me how to read music? I'm getting some calls for film dates, and I don't want to look like an idiot." I said, "No, I'm going to teach you enough so it doesn't hurt your playing." That's what
That's what
I
they say
always.
in Nashville, right? Do you read? And they say, yeah, but not to where it hurts my playing.
Right. But one of those guys was a drummer named Oscar Seaton, just an incredible player, man. And he said, "Yeah," I said, "No, I don't think I can help you, man. You don't need help. You just need more gigs. You'll get it. You'll get it.
Hmm.
You'll figure it." So I
Now, you
didn't get
also
the opportunity.
dealt with the invent of the Linden drum machine, and you've seen what's happened since then. Now we're come all the way from stem splitting, and we're into AI, and it's a dicey scene these days. I'd like your take on that, being with
Well,
your credentials on your bona fides behind it.
working with Leon Russell's band at the time, when Roger Lynn was a guitar player in the band. And if I would have known what he was building, I would have slowed the process down a little bit by stumbling over it.
Well, somebody else
But
would have built it anyway. I mean, look where we are now.
I wanted to have a license plate saying, if you can't play it, you're not allowed to program it. But, you know, yeah, I remember the syndromes, syndromes have feeling, "Choo!" All of that stuff. And
I like that. I hadn't heard that before.
I had a
Two.
Lindrum with live cymbals and stuff. I'll tell you a quick story. I had the whole Simmons um, SD7s, I think they were supposed to be MIDI capable, and I had one of the first sets. And there was only a handful of Keltner and Harvey Mason and a few that were doing that stuff, and I got thrown in with that herd, and I got called for uh, uh, what's his name? He just passed away. The Spanish composer Lalo Schifrin.
Oh, Schifrin.
I got called for a Lalo Schifrin date down at Paramount. Now there are two Paramount studios. There's a Paramount on Glen M on the Paramount lot, and then there's a Paramount studio over next to SIR on Sunset Boulevard or Santa Monica Boulevard. And so my roadie, my guy that set me up, uh, he took my electronic drums to the wrong Paramount. And Carl Fortina, who was a contractor, had a session in both of those places. So he gets to the studio and he says, "I'm here to set up the drummer for a Carl Fortina session." He said, "Yeah, right in there." So he goes in the wrong studio, sets him up, and I walk into Paramount where Lalo Schifrin's date is. The orchestra's in there waiting. And he said, "Where are your drums?" I said, "Oh my God." And I called Jimmy up and I said, "Get your ass over here ASAP." So he drove on the sidewalk to get him over there. He got him in, got him set up. They turned him on, and they had to start the orchestra date with a 10. That's a no no. A
Ooh.
no no. That was bad news. And then I sat down, I played, I did this session, and I, geez, it was the last time I worked for Lalo.
Isn't that
And it
something? Yeah.
was my fault. It wasn't the playing part, getting the drums there. So,
Yeah,
so
they don't
I
say
don't,
anything. They just don't call you again, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't have a soft spot in my heart for all of that stuff. I don't care how much they improve it. You can't beat the human nature of a musician behind a set of drums listening to other musicians in the same room. Period.
Amen. This is your website, and it opens with a montage of shots. You see, your new album is a jazz album. I guess that's your new group right there, right?
That was a while ago. Yeah, that was, I don't remember the exact year that was, a few years back. But
Okay.
I had this jazz trio with Joe Bagg on organ, John Cudini on guitar, and we worked quite a bit. We had two records out. One is called Reckless Abandon, and the second one is called Boomerang. And I'm quite proud of it. It was just very easy. These guys, we all played together. We all listened to each other and had a great time. And I just loved these two guys for what they brought to the table. And we all contributed in our own ways. And then Joe Bagg, he was just a delight to play with. He and his wife both got gigs out in different universities in Portland, and they moved. And so when he left town, I tried other guys. If you're a good organ, a B3 player in town, you're stupid busy. And I tried a couple other guys, and it just didn't. It wasn't the same. And so the trio kind of fell by the wayside. And then I started experiencing some health issues where it was harder and harder to do live shows and what have you. So I had to let that go, and that broke my heart. It really did. It
Well,
was.
how's your health now?
It's not good. It's could be better. I've got a little emphysema. Emphysema. Can't even say it. It's slowing me down. But I'm 82. You know, I'm still making
Beautiful,
records.
man. Well, let's look some more at this website. It's terrific. Here, your bio is here. I encourage everybody to go here, and we'll look at. I wish I could. I can't get this drum clinic thing to play here, but and I can't put it on
Yeah,
anyway. But there you are playing. You had the tracks from Paul, and you did "Live and Let Die," which is the thing you're probably most noted for. But there's a movie thing here. There's a big band thing here. There's all kinds of
Fantastic.
interesting
yeah,
things. And then
yeah.
the one that really surprised the hell out of me is you're a voiceover artist. And you can listen to the promos and commercials there. And man, you've done big time voiceover work. How'd you get involved in that? You sound great,
Uh,
by the way.
Actually, I met this girl in 1974 uh, at the Who studio in London. She, I was recording with Joe Cocker, and she was brought in for Joe, you know, and she turned out to be a voiceover agent. And so I just kept that, logged that away because as time was going by, producers on sessions would say, "Man, you got a great voice. You should get into voiceovers." I said, "No, I don't have time for that right now." And then there was a time that I did have time when the work slowed down and things got different. And so I started to, in '85. I went to the same girl, Vanessa Gilbert was her name, and she was a voiceover agent. And I said, "What do I do to get started?" And she said, "Go take this workshop, take that workshop, and then come back with a tape." You know, so I did as she instructed, and it was great. I could make some money without having to carry problems.
Really? And you have a voiceover booth in your house?
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people do that. And
back studio. You can see it, but the door that's half open. I got a little. That's my whisper booth. Anyway, and I got
and
a
how much of
decent.
that, I'm kind of fascinated by that. How much of that voiceover voice that you have is rich and deep? And is it effects? Is it the room? Or do you change the way you speak? You have a different voice you use for that?
No, if you change anything, you're working. That's what I've learned in voiceovers.
Hmm.
I mean, the idea is like Don LaFontaine. You get about this far from the microphone. When
Right.
you get about that far from the microphone does its job. That's all there is to it. You can
Proximity
hear the
effect.
difference.
Yeah, they call that proximity effect. But you also have to be careful with your popping your peas and pop, pop, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You really have. I mean, I was shocked. That's terrific. What a surprise. Let's look at a few more things here. The media stuff. You've got some great um, album covers and the like. And I can introduce some of these guys. That top picture left, that's the great Louis Bellson in the middle, and Joe Porcaro. And is that Ed Thigpen?
Right.
Yep.
And then
First
there's
time I heard,
Bernard with you. Is
yeah,
that Jim Chapin and the young Jeff Hamilton? There you are with Armin Zildjian. Who's the guy on the right?
Matt Sorum,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
a
Okay,
very good
and then
Abe
is
and
that Abe Laboriel there?
yeah, Abe Jr.
Junior. And there you are in the session with Paul playing. It looks like you just put some bongos on a stool and
Yeah, that was
started at it.
Graham.
And this was your teacher, Roy Knapp, right?
Woo!
Yes, I got I got really fortunate and studied with him most of the year that I was stationed in Chicago,
Mm.
and I used to Great Lakes actually. I'd come down for a lesson once a week, every time I could make it anyway. And I just loved Roy. He was amazing. And
Yeah, kit. We
yeah,
just had Daniel Glass on last show, and talked about those kinds of kits. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, you might look at that show. Anybody watching?
I,
Over here is a picture of the band. Very
yeah,
cool. Very cool.
I
Wow.
believe that Roy was the first drummer recorded because he did the Don McNeil Breakfast Hour from the Tip Top Toe Allerton Lounge in Chicago, and they recorded that. So I believe that he might have been the first drummer recorded.
Wow.
This was way back in the day, you know.
Let's look through a few more, and then I'll let you go. I don't want to keep you too long.
There's up the
Um,
top there.
Now, who's in this
Uh,
shot here? Is that John Lennon there?
no, that's Rick Danko, who I was
Oh, Rick
working with,
Danko, right, from the band.
Dr. John, and Marty Greb.
Okay,
Marty
Ooh.
I see that.
on Russell. And,
There's the band again, and
and
some press here too. Anyway, the website is just terrific, and we're only scratching the surface of your career. But man, I'm so impressed. Here's contact. Do you do lessons or?
I do. Yes, I have a few students now, and I'm slowing down a little bit, but I'm trying to keep my hand in it. I like giving it away, so I'm doing a little series where I hired a social media girl that she helps me get a little lesson out each week now. I'm trying to do that anyway, so
Mhm.
I can just play some of the things that I've learned and things that are important for a young drummer to have in his stash before he tries to get into this crazy world today.
Well,
And
I love that. That's what this is all about. None of us make a dime doing this, and if
We got to
whatever,
pay forward.
yeah.
You
that's
know,
right.
I just have gratitude. I'm stopping and thinking. Time's marching on. Uh, I think of the people that hired me along the way. Truth is, I should have been paying them for what I
Yeah.
was getting to learn.
Yep.
And then I see some youngsters that have got some talent, and it's nice to, you know, keep it moving. It's an oral tradition.
I've had three youngsters that went on. The one's in a senior down at USC right now. He's studying with all the best cats down at USC. But I got him going. He's Mike Garson's grandson, actually.
Oh,
And
wow.
his name is Max Gilbert. Had another kid who's living in London now, Cheryl Teagues' boy, Zach Peck. His grandfather was Gregory Peck. And, you know, some kids that came to me that I said, wow, this kid doesn't have a chance. And they're turning out to be great drummers. There's another kid that's going to school in New York now that he's making his bones in the city, man. He's doing good as a jazz player. And before I leave today, though, I mean, because Adam's here, this will be more for Adam than for the rest of the world. But Mel Lewis, if you spell Mel Lewis backwards, it's spelled, his name's Lem Seiwell. So Mel was like my father. When I first got to New York, he was like my dad. And we hung out in gyms and and, and then the highlight of my life was the night that Mel said, "Hey, can you come down and do the first or maybe two sets with the big band?" I have to do the Kraft Music Hall recording, and I I know you could play with the big band. And I went, no, I couldn't do that. He talked me into it. I went down to play with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra. I
Right.
sat down at the drums, and they all looked around at me. Well, I knew Jerry Gow. I knew a bunch of them from having worked with them before. But Snooky says to me, Snooky Young says, "Don't even bother, man. Don't look at the charts. Just swing, man." And I won't do that. I won't. I looked over it. I could see the third trumpet book there, so I started catching all the hits. I had the time of my life, and not many guys that played with McCartney or did the kind of work I did as a rock drummer ever get to play with the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra or a symphonic orchestra. So I'm really grateful.
That brings us full
Man,
circle.
I
Go ahead, Adam.
I I followed your path, man. Mel was one of my New York daddies,
No,
and
yep,
he had me in there. He said, "Can you cover the gig? I got to do something in Germany." And I said, "Man, I'm not the greatest." He goes, "Don't worry, man. Just swing. The band knows what to do." And
that's right.
it was fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what what a thrill.
Well,
Oh
Denny,
man.
I've come to the end of the time here, but I want to thank you. It's an honor to meet you, and your stories are fantastic. And I just respect the hell out of your career and what you've done in so many different genres, and the ability to keep reinventing yourself and to keep coming back and to
Amen.
stay present, stay in the moment, and just move through life as a drummer and a human being and an artist. And big respect to you, brother. I appreciate you. And the
Well,
book is
thank you.
fabulous, people. Get the book.
This has really been a treat for me too. I do a lot of interviews with this book and everything now, but this is nice to talk about the other part. Everybody wants to talk about McCartney, and all of that stuff. But boy, my life has been full of McCartneys, and they're all. A lot of it was the stuff that people don't know about. The
Amen.
Gary Gabor Zabos and Brad Meldows and all of these other
Yeah, I didn't know
cats.
any of that stuff about you. I'm glad you have the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And Adam, as
Great.
always, my trusted co
Great.
host.
Denny,
And
thank you for joining us. This was great. Now I got to read the book now. I'm behind. I'm reading the Kenny Wheeler book now
Okay.
about the great, British trumpet player who I was fortunate to get to work with, and that's been very insightful. And
I'll read as many as I can.
I just love this history.
Yeah. I was just
Yeah.
on a ship and I read your book and JR's book and Earl Palmer. I read
Oh,
three books
great.
on a ship in a week about drummers. So I love this history. And again, we'll start. Well, I started with the team you got there with Rob and Joe and Robin. It's just terrific. So pick up the book, everyone. You won't regret it.
You can get the book on HudsonMusic.com
Right.
and or Amazon, but Hudson Music is really they're the ones that went to bat and asked me if I'd like to write my book, Life Story. So I like to turn people towards them.